Good morning. Governor Cooper has declared March, the month of March, as Women's History Month. And today we are going to discuss changing the narrative, how we strengthen our communities by breaking down traditional stereotypes. The Office of State Human Resources is pleased to have our guest speaker today, Sarah Varger. But before we get to our guest speaker, I'd like to go over a couple of house rules that we always have, but I just want to just give everyone a brief reminder of our rules today. First of all, we will be recording this event, and at a later date, the recording will be published on our playlist, so you will be able to view this recording on demand. And today we will have a question and answer segment, and with that question and answer segment, we would like to ask that you put all of your questions in our chat. So put all of your questions in our chat room, and we will make sure that we get around to answering any of your questions and having our speaker answer any questions that you have. So please submit any questions that you have again to our chat. And again, I'm very pleased to have our speaker, our guest speaker here today. And here to introduce our guest speaker will be Regina Streety. Gina will be introducing our speaker for the day. So I'm going to turn everything over to Gina at this time. Thank you, Gina.
Thank you, Wendy. And I'm delighted to have the privilege of introducing Sarah. And Sarah, we welcome and thank you for being our special guest speaker today and for joining us in celebrating Women's History Month and making contributions to history in your work. It's really special to have you here. To read your introduction, Sarah Varger is an award-winning filmmaker based in Washington, D.C., who specializes in short-form documentaries. She is the president of Women in Film and Video, a nonprofit started 40 years ago to elevate women's voices in the media industry. Sarah has taught filmmaking at the university level since 2017. Her short documentary, Little But Fierce, was a finalist for the 2020 Student Academy Awards and can be viewed on Amazon. Sarah has worked around the world creating films on social issues in developing countries such as Iraq, Congo, India, Tibet, El Salvador, and Honduras. She also developed the production departments for two national public policy think tanks. She holds an MA in journalism from American University and an MFA in film from the Vermont College of Fine Arts. Sarah, again, welcome and thank you.
Thank you so much, Regina and Wendy. It's great to be here. Hello, everyone. Thank you for taking your lunch break with me. Hopefully this is a little informative. Wendy, do you mind sharing my slides? And so we will be doing a little bit of I'll be asking you to participate today. And the chat only goes to me, but I'm pretty sure the Q&A goes to everyone. So we might want to test that out if you guys have the Q&A. Otherwise, if I ask you to participate, we'll just use the chat and I'll just read out some responses. While we're waiting for the slides to come up. Wendy, do you need me to share my slides myself, or do you think you can get them up?
Hi, Sarah. You can go ahead and share your slides for right now.
Okay, great. Except that I don't have permissions to do that because you're the host.
Make her the host.
Oh, WebEx. It's always something with this platform. You would think after 2 years we'd have this figured out by now, but no. But it's great. I'm so happy I'm able to join you from Washington, D.C. this morning. I think most of you are in North Carolina, if that is correct.
Sarah, she's working on it. Yes, WebEx. But while we're doing that, I can ask you a little bit before you get into your slides. You'll probably share a lot of this as you go through your presentation, but maybe just tell us a little bit about you and what you've done
Oh, I'm
while she's
definitely gonna
putting that
get
up.
that is definitely part of my presentation this morning.
Okay, well,
Um,
okay. Well, we'll hold off on that and we'll just ask individuals.
Regina, it looks like you're the host now. Do you mind just making me the host?
He was just in here trying to do that. Wendy was just in my office. Okay, hold on. Let me see if I can move it now. Hold on. I don't know what happened with her screen, but yeah, it's not. Here we go. Let's see. It looks like it's trying to do it. There. You should have it now.
Great. All right.
There. Looks like it worked.
Slides. And
There you are.
can you see my slides?
I do.
Great, wonderful. Okay, well, as we said, good morning. I'm Sarah Varger. I am the president of Women in Film and Video. I'm also a documentary filmmaker, and I'm currently the senior video production lead for the Department of Defense's Health Agency. So I first want to say thank you so much for being here. I can't see who the participants are, but I'm hoping that there are some men in the room. And I really want to give a special thank you to all the men who showed up. Women, I feel like we have been talking about this for our entire lives, and we really can't elevate women's voices without your help, men. So thank you so much for showing up and knowing that sometimes, and now is one of those times, that you really need to have to take a step back and take a bench in order to give other people a chance to succeed and to participate. And I know I've been hearing a lot from my male friends that things are a little bit harder for them right now. So I just want to say thank you. I know that it's not always easy to take a back seat, and but sometimes it's necessary to help our communities grow and prosper. So thank you so much for that. I also want to point out that I'm going to be referencing women a lot in this speech since it is a women's history speech. That does not discount all the other disadvantaged groups out there, but because of the topic of today, I'm going to be speaking specifically towards women. So this is a little, I was doing, I hate all the memes, but this one I saw in my little research for this presentation. I say this constantly, it's not a competition. And watching other people succeed and be happy is really important to me, and it's really important for our communities. I'm going to talk a lot today about communities and community building. We all live in communities. You guys all showed up today as part of a community, so thank you for being here. I think most of you work in human resources, if that is not correct, or if that's correct. And it's not corporate resources, it's human resources, even though sometimes it can feel very corporate-y. But in a community, I found that we all do better when everyone is succeeding, right? Communities with lower unemployment rates have much lower crime rates. So when everyone has a good paying job, our communities do better. So I'm really going to focus on this idea of community today. Community building is something that I spent a lot of my free time on. Much of that is unpaid, at least monetarily. But it's something that's really important to me, and I find that it brings me a lot of joy building communities in my different networks of people. So as was said in my introduction, I am, and you probably read the flyer, I'm currently the president of Women in Film and Video. We are a nonprofit based out of Washington, D.C. We have over 900 members in the Mid-Atlantic region, and we've been around for over 40 years. So I'm just one of many women who have had the honor of leading this organization over the years. And the reason that we exist is because women have traditionally been underrepresented in the film and media industry. And unfortunately, we still are today. Our organization is not just for women, but that is our primary focus. So a little stats. This comes from the Cellular Ceiling Report that came out last year. They regularly do a report. It's from San Diego State University. And they did a study of the top 250 grossing films. And out of those 250 films, only 25% of the directors, writers, producers, executive producers, editors, and cinematographers were women. Only 25% of the main jobs on any film set are women. The good news is that back in 1998, we were only at 17%. So we've grown a whopping 8% in the past 23 years. Big gains there. Now, I don't know if you guys know this, but half of our country is women. And I'm pretty sure most of us watch movies. So why are men controlling the majority of the media that we consume? And really, if we're talking about media, we're talking about the majority of representation that we all see on a regular basis. But I'll come back to this idea of representation in a minute. So, my organization, I'm confident is going to be around for quite some time, which is really great news for my executive director, who is the only full-time employee we have on staff. But it's really not great news for all of the women in my community. And it's not great for our communities as a whole. When one group is controlling how everyone else is represented, I see that as a problem. So a little bit more about my background. I am a documentary filmmaker, as Regina said, and I have had the privilege and the honor of traveling all over the world, meeting people from communities and backgrounds that are very, very different from my own. Over here on the left, this was a shoot with small business owners in Honduras. Down at the bottom left, I was filming some orchard farmers in Kurdistan in northern Iraq. The bottom middle photo is me filming with Tibetan beekeepers. And these two photos on the right, I was in the Congo, in the Democratic Republic of Congo for a few months filming their stories. And all of these communities are communities of people who have been oppressed for generations. And they are wonderful people. And it's been very, very humbling and eye-opening to meet people outside of my bubble and to get to tell their stories. On the flip side, I have also had the chance to interview some world leaders and heads of states. On the right, that is the former ambassador for Italy. On the left, that is former Second Lady Lynn Cheney. And both of these groups of people, oops, I don't know how to go back. There we go. Both of these groups of people have had very different life experiences from my own. But I've learned so much from getting out of my bubble and interacting with other people who are different from me and from different communities than my own. So a little bit more about my background that you're not going to find on LinkedIn. And so one thing I've learned over the past 38 years is that it's really easy to look at someone now and read their resume and know all about their successes and make assumptions about who they are as a person. I think we've all done that before. I know I am guilty of doing that. So here's some background that's not on LinkedIn. So this is me and my three brothers. I grew up in suburban New Jersey, outside Philly. I am the oldest by 6 minutes. So I have a twin brother and two younger brothers. And I would call myself a late bloomer. This is important. We're going to get to why I'm talking about having brothers. And here's another picture. This is in front of our church. My parents were already divorced at this time. And I don't know if any of you have parents who are now in their 70s or older, or if any of you are in your 70s. So my dad, who I love, is someone that we would call at the time a ladies' man. Now we would call him a misogynist. My mother does not consider herself a feminist by any stretch of any stretch of that word. She probably considers feminist to be the F word. But yet somehow these two humans managed to raise a woman who has traveled all over the world making short films for humanitarian causes. I own property. I am not married. I have no children. I'm a little bit queer. I literally Ted Cruz's waking nightmare. And we were very middle class. We were probably lower middle class. And I was really lucky enough to get a grant to go to American University in Washington, D.C., which is a private college. Promise I'm getting to the point. So my sophomore year of college in 2003, I was lucky enough to get a paid internship with a top political ad agency in the country. I was paid $8.50 an hour back in 2003, almost 20 years ago. The fact that anyone is still making that amount astonishes me. It's horrendous. I don't care what the minimum wage is. We should be treating members of our communities better than just what the minimum is required of us. So that's my little comment on the minimum wage. But I'll never forget the interview that I had for that internship. So as I discussed earlier, most production companies are male dominated. And this particular production department was no exception. There were 2 assistants and a production manager who were female, and then every single producer, editor, and senior position was held by a man. So there were at least 7 men and only 3 women on staff, and the women were in the lowest paid positions. So I got this internship that was highly coveted. There were probably dozens, if not hundreds, of other applicants who applied for the position, and I worked my butt off. I definitely earned this job, but I was told almost immediately when I got this job that part of the reason I got it was because I was a woman. Because one of the production assistants, who was a woman, was determined that at least one of the 2 internships was going to go to a woman. She had to be intentional about it because historically, all these men kept giving internships to other men who looked like them. And it had nothing to do with that they were being sexist. It's that they weren't being intentional about who they were giving this position to. And the job absolutely launched my career. I have no doubts about that. And it's not that I didn't deserve it, but they had to be very mindful that they were giving a position to a woman. Sadly, this was one of my very first interviews I ever had, and it would not be the last time that I was told that I would get a job because of my gender. 14 years later, I was an established video editor. I've been editing for at least 15 years at this point. And I got hired at a production company that was once again male dominated, except this time there were no women in the office. There were at least 10 men there, all different ages, all different ethnic backgrounds. And when they were hiring for the next position, the hiring manager's wife literally had to point out to him that there were no women who worked at his company and that the next person he hired needed to be a woman. Before his wife had and she works in the industry as well, before she had pointed this out to him, it didn't even dawn on this office full of men, that there were no women in the room. And this is important. So I told you a little bit about my family background because I grew up with boys. I know how to fit in the boys. It didn't bother me that I was the only woman in the room because I was used to that. Not everyone is me though. Luckily, after I broke up this boys club, I guess they realized that having women around wasn't so bad or might even be a good thing. And all of a sudden, the makeup of the company changed. Over the next couple of years, about 35% of the staff would end up being women. It takes a while because when you can only hire, once you've gotten into a rut, right? Once you've started hiring people, there's only so many new positions that open up. So even if every other new position you hire is a woman, you still have 10 people who have been working for the company for years, who are established, who are going to work their way up faster than the new hires are going to. So yes, I'm used to being the only woman in the room. It didn't bother me so much. But not everyone is me. There are how many other young women out there want to be editors or directors or cameramen, but do not see a single other woman in one of these roles. I know most of you don't work in film, so I'm gonna tie this into you guys soon. But on set in any production company, generally everyone starts out as a production assistant. So it doesn't matter who you are, if you're entry level, you're starting out as a PA. But what if the only women you see on set are doing wardrobe and hair and makeup, and every other position, lighting, camera, electric, directing, are all done by men? It's really, really hard to imagine yourself in those positions when you don't see anyone else who looks like you doing those jobs. And it's even harder to ask people to mentor you who don't look like you, who you can't relate with, or maybe who you don't feel comfortable talking to. And what's even harder than that is trying to convince someone else that you can do this job when they've never seen anyone who looks like you do that job. As a hiring manager, if you've only hired men to edit, because you've only ever known male editors, because you grew up in a male dominated world, that becomes normal. And it's going to take a lot more than putting EEO, or equal employment opportunity, in a job description to change that. So this doesn't just apply to the film industry, right? This applies to pretty much every single industry outside of caregiving jobs in our country. Childcare, elementary education, social work, those are female dominated industries. Every other industry in this country is male dominated. But that makes sense, right? That completely makes sense. Women couldn't vote in this country until 1920. That was after my grandmother was born. When my grandmother was born, she did not have the right to vote. Women couldn't get a mortgage to buy their own homes in this country until 1974. My mother was 24 when that law was passed. I was 24 when I bought my first home. I was one generation away from not legally being able to get a loan to buy a house. In my mother's generation, so this is one generation removed, women didn't have jobs outside of being a secretary or a teacher. We literally had to have an entire women's workers' rights movement, the 9 to 5 movement, to help women have equality in the workplace. And we're not even talking about equality. We're just talking about being able to go to a job and not get sexually harassed by your boss. That was only 50 years ago. In 1974, when the Equal Credit Opportunity Act was passed, the one that prevented women from being discriminated against in mortgages, in home loans, our current president was 32 years old. He had already been in the Senate for 2 years. When the same people are in charge, it's really difficult to make change. It's not impossible, but when the same people are in the same roles for decades, that means that other people don't get a seat at the table because we're waiting for someone to step down in order for there to be room for us to sit. So sometimes you need to take a step back and give other people a chance. And a lot of the times, we're not even talking about stepping back. We're talking about giving them a boost. You know, sometimes you don't get to watch the game because you're giving someone else a little lift. So there's this comment. I don't know. You've probably all seen this before. I know I had seen this before. This image that's used to show the difference between equity and equality. So if equality, everyone gets a milk crate to stand on. Equity, the person who's tall gives their milk crate to the person who's shorter, so everyone gets to watch the game. Here's another version of that cartoon that I found recently that kind of displays what it looks like when you haven't had equity for decades. Is that one person has a lot more milk crates than the other person. So even if we take a couple from this person so that everyone could see, the guy on the right's still going to have an advantage. Now, I don't know about you, but I've been to baseball games before, and I know that not all seats are created equal. And we're not talking about milk crates, really. We're talking about money. And this is a little bit harder to swallow when we're talking about finances. Um, so, how do we talk about taking literal cash from someone and giving it to someone else? Especially from people who've been accustomed to having certain jobs, they've been accustomed to their way of life. How do we do that? One of the ways is not asking. If you ask someone, hey, can you give some of your money to this person over here? Sometimes we help out, right? We're a generous society. Um, but we have to just start doing it, and we have to be proactive, and we have to be intentional. Just like my former boss didn't realize that there was no women at that production company until someone pointed it out to them. Recognizing there's a problem is the first step. Then being intentional and intentionally bringing women to the table is the second step. And part of the way we do that is we have to change the way that we think. So one of the big things that we face in our society is this concept of stereotypes. So this is where I'm going to ask you guys to participate. So I think you all know what, let's see, can I pause sharing? Here we go. Stop sharing. All right, so you all probably think you know what a stereotype is, but why don't you post in the chat, or if the Q&A is working, in the Q&A what you think a stereotype is, and we can read. I'm going to read some of these out. Men are strong is the stereotype. Yeah.
Everyone, please feel free to respond to our presenters' questions.
I'm going to do this like I do with my students. If I sit here long enough, it'll force you to participate. What do we think of when you think of a stereotype? It could be an example of a stereotype. It could just be, what is a stereotype? It's like we all know what irony is, but explaining what irony is a little bit harder.
I have one.
Okay,
Women are
assuming
emotional.
so it looks like the Q&A is working, and I think everyone can see everyone's answers there. Women are bad drivers. That's a stereotype, especially I think Asian women also get the brunt of that one, sadly. Making assumptions based off of gender, religion, etc., that a particular trait belongs to a particular group of people. That is, Tracy, great definition of what a stereotype is. Yes, preconceived notions passed down through generations. Absolutely, Belinda. Yeah, assumptions about a group. Thank you, Candace. Uh, yes, how they're usually rooted in truth, but that's not always the case. Mike, you agree with Belinda? You both talked about not having much validity in reality. Great. These are great examples and definitions of what a stereotype is. And we see these every day. Every day we see stereotypes. Okay, let's see if I can get my presentation back. Okay, so here is a very popular show. Who knows what show this is?
Party. Yes.
Modern Family. Yes, thank you. What are some, this has a lot of stereotypes in this show. What are some of the stereotypes that are made about the characters in this show? I'm sure all of you have probably seen at least half an episode of Modern Family. What about, look at the only person wearing glasses. That is like my favorite stereotype. That the only way that someone can be smart, that we know someone's smart, is if they're wearing glasses. And no one else is allowed to wear glasses. Right, or you're old, right? Like the dad. Sorry, I forgot he was also wearing glasses. Yeah, you smart or old. You either have to be losing your vision because you're old or wearing glasses because you're nerdy, and that's it. It's the only way you get glasses in Hollywood. Here's another show. This is a little bit newer. It's Ted Lasso. It won a bunch of Emmys recently. Once again, who do you think the smart person in this show, the nerdy person in this show is? So yeah, so casting is kind of a problem. We definitely tend to reiterate stereotypes constantly in the media by portraying the same people playing the same characters over and over and over again. Um, and unfortunately, it hasn't changed in many years. We constantly, the number one male leads that we see in media are white men. This was a study that came out a couple weeks ago by USC School of Communications, Annenberg. And over the past over a decade, not much has changed in representation on screen. So in 2007, only 20% of the top 1,500 films had female leads or co-leads. We've made it up to 41% this year. Some years are doing a little bit better than others. 2 years ago, we got all the way up to 43%. That's still 7 percentage points less than actual representation in our society. Half the people in our society are women, yet still today, only 41% of films have female leads or co-leads. And don't even get me started on women over the age of 45. Only 7 films last year had female leads over the age of 45. By contrast, there were 27 films that had male leads over that age. And none of those women were white. None of those women were not white. They were all white. So representation is pretty poor if you're a woman. It's even awful if you're a woman of color. So only 11 of the top 100 films in 2021 depicted an underrepresented female lead or co-lead. So 9 were in 2020, and none of them were over the age of 45. Amazon. Okay, so a lot of your HR professionals, so you've probably heard this before, but the Amazon story is one of my favorite stories. Um, So I don't know how much you guys. So I just want to point out that this casting problem isn't just in Hollywood. This spans all industries, like I previously said. So Amazon, back in 2014, they started developing an AI, a computer to help their human resources department more quickly go through resume applications. So they are hoping that the AI could learn the hiring practices of Amazon. And through that, if they get 100 resumes, the AI can pull out the top 5 best resumes. And they were doing this for more senior level positions, or hoping to do this for more senior level positions. So the AI they gave the AI all the information from the past 10 years, all the resumes that had been submitted for a job, and then the ones that had been hired for that position, so that the computer could learn Amazon's hiring practices. And what happened is that the computer started throwing away resumes that mentioned women's groups. So if you said you were the captain of the women's swim team, your resume got thrown out. And if you had gone to an all-female college, there were 2 specific colleges, your resume was getting kicked out as well. And so what the computer ended up doing was pointing out, by coming up with algorithms, that for the past decade, Amazon had had sexist hiring practices. And they didn't even realize it until they trained a computer to do their jobs. and the computer pointed it out to them. So luckily, I guess luckily the AI never got used or implemented for their hiring practices. Um, but those same people were probably in those same jobs still implementing these biases that they didn't even realize that they were doing. So how do we break these stereotypes? Um, when we're so used to looking at certain people in certain roles, we really have to go out of our way to reframe what we imagine in our heads that these people look like. We know in Hollywood that the nerdy person wears glasses, and the brown person's the white person's best friend, and they're the comic relief. And when we look at these characters, that's what we imagine in our head. That the doctor's a male and the dental hygienist is a female. But when you think about your real life and you think about the people in your life, that's not indicative. What we see on TV is not indicative of the people that we know in our communities. At least it's certainly not for me. So I'm also a film professor. I teach at George Mason University and American universities. And one of the things that we've been trying to do, and as part of Women in Film and Video, we've had a lot of casting workshops. And so one of the things I try to remind my students to do, and our members of our group, when they're looking at films, is can you cast this role for something that what you traditionally think it is? Just because it was written for a white male, does that mean it has to be a male? Does he have to be white? If there's a character who doesn't have a disability in the script, can someone in a wheelchair play this character without having to mention that they have a disability? Can they just be a human being? Can a trans person play this role, not because the character is trans, but just because it's a character and they can play it? One of the greatest, so we have to get creative, and we have to start thinking out of the box. I don't know if many of you know this, but Ripley in Alien was originally written for a man. And I don't know who had the great idea to put Sigourney Weaver in that role, but I can tell you Alien would not be the same movie without Sigourney Weaver. She did an amazing job in that role and really defined what it looked like to be a female action hero. Sadly, there are not too many more examples of this type of casting, but it was really well done. And the more that we can start thinking about people in different roles that we don't normally see, the more we're going to start seeing more and more diversity in the casting and in these roles. So I wanted to challenge you to start thinking outside of the box when you think of an engineer that you're hiring, or a teacher, or a social worker, or a bus driver. Who are the people you normally see in these roles, and how can we go out of our way? Just because someone isn't, almost any job anyone can do, right? There's a plethora of people who can fit into a specific job. So being intentional and going out of your way to try to hire people in different groups is going to be really helpful to your community and for representation in order to diversify. So some of the ways, get back to Women in Film and Video. So some of the ways that we help build our community, we do a lot of networking events, because we find that, if you're a writer and you want to write, but you don't know any other female writers, bringing people together and letting them meet other people is a great way to do that. Luckily, with the pandemic, we have been able to grow our community outside of the DC area. We've done a lot of networking events online. We've done a lot more workshops online. One of the big things we do is we do a lot of training and workshops so that people who don't normally have access to these things now have very cheap or free access to a wealth of information. The thing about networking and community building that I've learned over the years, it's a pretty low lift, especially now with Facebook and social media and online events. People just want to gather, but not everyone is a planner. So honestly, building an event and pushing it out to the community, if you get 5 people to show up the first time, there's 5 more people who didn't know each other. And then the next time you do something, it brings five more people together. And slowly but surely, your community is going to start to grow and these networks are going to start to grow. But everyone just needs that one person to say, hey, let's do this thing. We're going to do it on Sunday. We're going to do it on Zoom. Here's the link. And just, it's such a low, easy ask, but it's something that not everyone has the skill set to do. So if that's in your skill set, if you have this community that you want to start building, that's a very easy way to start doing it. Over the years, we have done a lot of seed funding and small grants that we give to female filmmakers to tell female focused stories. We do fiscal sponsorship. So Women in Film is a nonprofit. We have nonprofit tax status. There's a lot of organizations that give money out, but they will only give them to nonprofits for tax reasons. So we'll fiscally sponsor female film projects so that they can get those tax charitable donations on their behalf. And another thing that we've started recently is a mentorship program. So we pair up young up and coming filmmakers with more seasoned veterans to help them through the process. So I would like to know what are some ways that you guys have created change in your community, are creating change in your community. Could some ideas that you might have to do that? So I think the Q&A is the best place to post so because everyone can see it. Oh my God, yes, the fiery Latinx woman. So what are some ways that you guys have either seen community building or have used it in your own communities? I'm sure I can't be the only person who has advice on this talk. I was gonna give you guys a chance to share your tips and tricks as well. So you join a local chamber of Congress? Yeah, that's a great way to meet other people in the community who are have like-minded interests. Yeah, infinity groups are great. Slack, I don't know how many of you are on Slack or Microsoft Teams, but you can create professional groups within your organization and do things like Regina's doing, which is bringing people together once a month to have conversations.
Sarah, I want to chime in. I have one example of community building that really surprised a lot of people and how it worked out. An event was planned and we didn't realize that this professor actually had in her mind, I need to get, adults together to talk and to, develop something. She planned an event around the children. Anyone who had children, stepchildren, grandchildren, would bring their children to the event. And then the kids did whatever they did, but she brought the grown-ups together for her agenda, and it was brilliant. So I just wanted to throw that out there. We still talk about that.
Oh, that's a great idea because it also takes away that barrier of childcare as well. Yeah, so the more you can grow your networks, the more conversations you can have, the better. The first step is identifying the problem, but I think we've done that. And then the second step is not just waiting for it to go away. It's being very intentional and proactive. And I have one more piece of advice that I wanted to leave you all with. Oh, I don't know if I still have my presentation up. So I found that women are traditionally, oops, very bad at what I like to call radical self-promotion. Um, Men see, especially in the film industry, if a man has made a film, you know about it the first 5 minutes, 5 seconds of meeting him. But women traditionally, we are amazing and smart and talented and hard workers, and we are terrible at bragging about ourselves. So I would like to challenge all of you to once a day promote yourself. Whether it's an amazing thing you did at work, whether it's an amazing thing you did at home, with your nonprofit, with your volunteering, get used to talking about yourselves and how great you are, and get used to talking about each other and how great each other is. It's really great. Other people can hype you up and talk about your projects and talk about the great things that you're doing. Do it in front of your friends so that they know that you're doing it. But we are so bad at promoting ourselves, and we're not doing ourselves a service. Being humble doesn't serve you. So just once a day, I want you to like put this on a post-it and put it on your desk monitor. Once a day, just brag about something amazing that you did. And not in a bad way, but just to like, look at this awesome thing that I'm doing. Um, and then do it for your communities too. Do it for the other women around you, because we really need to get better at this. So that's all I have to say. So thank you so much for coming today. If there are any questions or if anyone had anything to add, I think we still have a little bit more time left. We have like 10 minutes left.
Yes, we do. And Sarah, again, thank you so much for your presentation. I did want to state as well that you really, with your last point of advice, what you're hitting on with turning around and really tooting your own horn, that is a big stereotype for women. We're taught from a very early age to be humble and be graceful about how we do things. And men are stereotypically taught to really boost themselves up and brag on what they do and their accomplishments. So again, that ties very much so to your presentation. And I'd just like to say again that we really need to become better advocates of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm looking here to see if I have any questions in the chat. And again, we've opened our chat function up for questions. We're going to roll over from the Q&A function now to our chat function. So please feel free to submit your questions to our speaker from the chat function. I'm looking here. Gina, do you have any questions while we're waiting on some questions to come in?
You know the answer to that. I always have questions. Sarah, you have been very successful in your career, and you did share how your family influenced your progression. Hold on, let me turn my camera on because I need to do that. And I always seem to forget to do that. But you did share that your family helped you with that just by growing up as the only girl in the family. So they influenced your progression. But beyond that, just using your own experiences as an example, what behaviors do you think are required to be self-empowered versus just sitting back and waiting or expecting an organization or even a person or people to empower you? You just shared radical self-promotion as one. What else would you recommend?
That's a really good question. I do get this a lot from women being like, how do you do it? Like from younger women being like, how do you do it? The biggest tip that I can, or thing that I figured out is that no one knows what they're doing. We are all figuring this out as we go along. And like the fake it till you make it, it's true. Like no one knows what they're doing. And we look around and we see these women who seem like, or these people who seem like they have it together. No one knows what they're doing. We've all done this before, right? I've never done I'd never been the president of women in film until someone asked me to do it. I've been the vice president and watched other people do it. And you just kind of sometimes have to jump in and give it a shot. And sink or swim, you're probably going to swim. Things are usually not as scary or as hard as you think they are. Usually your worst case scenario is exactly that. It's this completely unrealistic worst case scenario, something that's going to happen, and it's not going to happen. I promise you it's not. So once I figured that out, I was like, oh, no one knows what they're doing. Okay, cool. That's great. The other thing is I have this amazing network of other women who we all have different careers. We all live, some of us are in DC, but we're all over the country. Who just support each other and lift each other up. And we are never in competition. We are always like praising each other's hard work, and like someone will get a promotion and not tell the group, and the other person will be like, hey, everyone, Susie just got a promotion. Let's give her some accolades and like, send her some flowers. So having a network of people, one thing I learned from living all over the world in these conflict regions or post conflict regions, um, you don't need a million friends. You need like two strong people who you can rely on and talk to, and you lift each other up is like the bare minimum. You don't need 1,000 or 100 or 50. So just surrounding yourself by other strong women or role models and people that you trust. And then on the flip side is figuring out those people who aren't serving you and not giving them your time and your resources. I learned not too long ago to stop taking care of grown ass adults and to surround myself by other women who are at the same position that I am, or who are women that I admire and respect their opinions, and to stop spending my time and resources on those who don't serve me. So those have been some ways that and then lifting other people up, recognizing the people who you can serve and who, like with our mentorship program, for example, I have this amazing mentee. But it goes both ways. They'll contact me and be like, hey, I need a work night. Can I come over? I need help getting some, job applications done. And they'll come over and I'll help them with that. But at the same time, I'm like, oh, actually, I have this project that I've been wanting to do and I've been putting off. While you're here, I'm going to sit down and work on this and we can have a work day together. So it's going both ways. It's not just one person lifting the other person up. So those are some of the things that I've learned over the years.
You actually answered my other question, so I don't even have to ask that. I was going to ask you who else empowered you to utilize your unique talents and tap into, your capabilities. And you just told us that. So that was great.
Yeah.
Wendy, I have more questions. Do you have any? I don't want to monopolize. Wendy?
You're muted, Wendy. But also, Regina, I was very lucky to have very early on in my career a bunch of female producers who were very much hiring younger women and definitely wanted to fill their when they got to staff up a project, they were very intentional about hiring as many women and bringing in especially younger women that they could lift up as possible. Yeah.
That's great. That actually makes me think of another question. When we're talking about creating an inclusive work environment where women are valued and respected for being contributing members of, an organization, whether it's media or government or private industry, that takes determination and commitment at all levels. So do you have a strategy or any advice that you can offer for achieving that kind of multi-level commitment and resolve, so that everybody's focused on it?
Yes. And the answer that I found is really calling people out and pointing things out. And it's hard. It's a hard thing to do, especially, we're bad at promoting ourselves. We're also bad at telling other people like, hey, that wasn't an appropriate thing, or, hey, you need to pay attention to this. And sadly, a lot of people don't even realize they're doing it, right? So just like my former boss had to have his wife be like, yo, you need to hire a woman. I was on a call recently with a bunch of senior leadership. It was like, there's probably 45 people, and it's a phone call, so you can't see anyone. And the call was started out with this joke by the person who runs this weekly call. And the joke was, a husband and wife are in the grocery store shopping, and they're going through a grocery store, and the husband grabs a case of beer and puts it in the cart, and the wife's like, oh, how much is that? Oh, it's $20. Oh, that's too expensive. Take that out of the cart. So they do, and they were going through the store some more, and they get to the pharmacy aisle and she throws some face cream in the cart. And the husband's like, oh, well, what's that? And she's like, oh, that's my face cream. He's like, how much is that? She's like, $40. And he's like, well, what's it for? And she's like, oh, it makes me prettier. And he's like, well, that's what the beer is for. And it's half the price as your face cream. Okay. And then I sat, and I was very new. I was one of the newest people on this call. And I sat there expecting there to be crickets, and people laughed. Men and women laughed. And I immediately had to message my supervisor and was like, that was inappropriate. And luckily, she's also a woman. And she's like, I completely agree, and talked to him. And he was like, great, I'm going to cut it out with the jokes. But he didn't even realize that joke was problematic. Of course not, because if he did, he wouldn't have said it. And it took someone speaking up and saying, hey, that's not the most appropriate way to start off this call with a bunch of people who have never even met you, but also just not appropriate for a work call at all. And so those jokes would have kept on happening. And when new people are joining, it just creates this environment that isn't welcoming, and just environments like, it's really hard to take a job when you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm going to take this job, but I'm the only person who looks like me in this room. So what is that community going to feel like when you're working with other people every single day? And it's hard because that means either some people have to leave and then you have to intentionally replace them. I don't know, building a community from scratch is a lot easier than changing existing structures. But one of the ways we have to do that is by calling people out and pointing it out to them. Many kids don't want to be a bully and don't realize they're being a bully until someone calls them one, and they're like, oh, right, no, I don't, that's a bad word now, I don't want to do that. But in my day and age, we didn't do that. Now it's getting a lot better. And, not saying that people are bullies, but problematic behavior is not going to change unless we're pointing it out and asking people to change.
Thank you. Wendy, I turn it back to you. I see we're coming up with the end. Wendy?
Yes. And your advice is very insightful as far as, the things that we can do to foster a community of inclusiveness. And that includes women and minorities, and just being more open and receptive to the change and to perceptions that everyone has, and their views and perspectives. So I'm just very glad that we had you here today, Sarah, as a speaker. And on behalf of the Office of State Human Resources, I would again like to thank you for coming in and being our speaker today. I would like for everyone to continue to look out for any additional programming that we will have with our Lunch and Learn series. Our next one will focus on Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month that will be coming up in May. So be on the lookout for information about our forthcoming Lunch and Learn series. And we again would like to thank everyone for attending this programming, and especially thanking Sarah Varger for being our speaker today. Thank you, and this will conclude our Lunch and Learn series for Women's History Month. Thank you.